is Keys to the Shop, episode 422, Coffee Truck Success with Vincent LaVolpa of Green Joe Coffee School. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out the show. It really means a lot to me. And, the show has been going on now for a better part of 7 years, and there's about 750 some odd published episodes. There's a lot to choose from. If you go to keystotheshop.com, you can find all of the main episodes there, and I would really recommend subscribing to Keys to the Shop. Get it in your podcast player, and you can search the content fully that way. We don't have the shift break episodes, the short format episodes on Thursdays. We don't have those up on the website, at least not yet. But the best way to check those out is to get subscribed to the show. And that way you'll always be updated with new content as it comes out. And I would really be honored if you'd share these episodes as well with your coworkers, with your boss, with your staff. The content here with great guests and exploring really important topics is going to positively impact your coffee business. So thank you very much, everybody. Now, Keys to the Shop is not just doing a podcast, but Keys to the Shop is also a consulting company, coaching. That means that I get to work one-on-one with a ton of great entrepreneurs and coffee operators, either starting businesses or wanting to improve their existing business and solve problems through coaching. One of the things that's being added as a service on top of the site visits and calls and coaching is the Keyholder Coaching Group. The Keyholder Coaching Group is a group that's going to be launching in September. It is a group of 5 entrepreneurs and coffee shop owners who are wanting to be with other like-minded individuals to find solutions, insights, get accountability, encouragement, and inspiration together. And I've seen so many great and positive results from community, from conversations, and this kind of with the coaching groups, the Keyholder Coaching Group, is going to be really transformational. And applications are open for the group launching in September. If we get enough applications, we might even be able to do 2 groups, but I wanted to let you know about that. Check out the show notes for this show to apply for it, or you can go to keystotheshop.com/consulting, and there you can find a link to go and apply to be a part of this group. So I'm really excited about this. Again, check out the link and apply today. Now, if you want to have a next level coffee experience in your shop, if you want to impress your guests with the ultimate expression of what coffee you serve is capable of, and you want to open up different revenue streams and profitability, then you can join scores of people from around the world in using the Ground Control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee. The Ground Control uses SCA award-winning technology. It gives you access to the depth and range your coffee truly has within it for the best batch brew you've ever had in your life. And also it can make tea, batch iced lattes, batch cold brew. The extraction potential is off the charts. So people are using this for catering. They're using it for, like we say, batching different drinks on the bar. That increases their efficiency and provides different profitability streams for their business. This machine and the team behind it are incredible. And so you should check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee to learn more information. It's been such a pleasure to see so many people adopting this brewer in their cafe and the difference that it's making. And if that's something that you want to have in your shop, then again, check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee. Consistency is obviously a huge factor in why people continue to come to your coffee shop. And not only is that a factor, but also quality. So consistency and quality. And people who drink plant-based beverages, soy and almond and oat, etc., they are on the hunt for something that is consistent, that is something a barista can use and they can trust that the result is going to be quality, it's going to taste good, and it's going to be consistent. That is the Barista Series from Pacific. The Barista Series is the line of plant-based performance beverages that is designed for baristas. It is designed so that the baristas have an easy time making the most excellent plant-based beverages. It is tested by some of the best baristas in the world before any of the product line is launched into the wild. And so you can trust that it'll stand up to the heat from steaming. It will have texture perfect for latte art, and it's also going to keep the flavor balance focused on the coffee. So check them out at pacificfoodservice.com. Reach out to them and let them know you want some samples. They'll be happy to send them to you, and check it out for yourself. I think you're going to be impressed, and so will your guests. And again, if you're going to be serving plant-based beverages in your shop, which that's pretty much all of us, then I think you should be using the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we are going to be talking with Vincent LaVolpa, who is the owner of Green Joe Coffee School. Vincent opened his first coffee trailer in 2015, but before that, his coffee journey began in the military, where he was part of the 16th Engineer Battalion of the 1st Armored Division, seeking and destroying IEDs, and coffee was a big factor in keeping them alert in those conditions. In that environment, he actually happened upon French press coffee and freshly roasted coffee, and that kind of jump-started his journey. After leaving the military, he went on to work for 7 years for Albuquerque Ambulance with a degree in emergency medicine, and from there went into coffee entrepreneurship, and that's where his first coffee trailer came into being. It was a great entry-level way to get into coffee versus opening a coffee shop. Vincent saw so much success in that first iteration of mobile coffee. He started to expand, and by the end of the second year of being in coffee, he had a coffee truck, trailer, 4 carts, and in 2018, it was his 3rd year in business, and he opened Helix Coffee and Yoga, a coffee house and yoga studio in collaboration with his wife. And that is around the time where he published his first book on coffee roasting. And from 2019 onward, he's dedicated himself full-time to coffee consulting, helping people launch profitable mobile coffee businesses. And that is where we are going to focus our time with Vincent today, talking about his journey, talking about the lessons that he's learned, also practical wisdom about mobile coffee, and specifically with coffee trucks, and what you need to know about people, what you need to know about machines, and what you need to know about working with the trades, and the secrets that go into being successful in this context. Obviously, this is one of those areas that is growing continually, especially after the pandemic, and as an entry point into coffee, it is one of the most accessible. And so I hope that today's conversation really gives you additional insights and information that will help you be successful if this is the path that you have chosen, or this is something that you're just wanting to do as an expression of your coffee and you already have a coffee shop. This is going to be useful for you as well. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with Vincent LaVolpa of Green Joe Coffee School. All right, Vincent, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you today?
Hey, Chris, it's a great day. How are you doing?
It's a great day as well. Yeah, I'm doing great. You know, the longer I do this podcast, the more I realize just how unique every business is. And I think in terms of how different entities and businesses can just take on their surroundings, a business like a truck or a mobile expression of coffee is extra unique because it just goes to so many different places and it has its own challenges, whether it's a farmer's market or a wedding or an event, or it's just stationed in the same place. It's just is a unique context. And so I'm excited to talk to you about this. This is your world. You've been doing this for the, better part of 6 years now?
It's my eighth year.
Eighth year, yeah.
Yeah.
And so were you in coffee before that?
I was not. My history is I'm a paramedic by trade. I have a degree in emergency medicine. And before that, I did some military time. I was stationed with the U.S. Army 16th Engineer Battalion out of Baghdad, Iraq.
And so that obviously is a place where you must have really longed for comforts of home or just something that would give you a sense of rootedness. Is this where coffee kind of came into the picture?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Like many of us, coffee for me was a necessity. I was a driver with the 16th Engineer Battalion. It's a combat engineer battalion, which basically meant we were on tours for roadside explosives. That's IEDs is what we we were on seek and destroys, and so I had to drive. I needed to be awake, so I got started at at a classic U.S. Army dining facility, a DFAC, drinking that day old thermos coffee. That was my introduction to coffee. So when I got back to Germany, where I was originally stationed, a friend of mine introduced me to the French press. And that was the game changer, was freshly roasted coffee and French press. And that's where my love began.
So then you're no longer in the military.
Right.
And you take that experience. What makes you think it's more than just a magical coffee experience for you? And then that's it. It just becomes something that you enjoy, but it doesn't become a business. How did it turn into you being the go-to, coffee truck guy?
I worked as a medic for 7 years here in Albuquerque Ambulance, right? And, home of Breaking Bad. So it was it was a ride, man. It really was. And after 7 years, I burned out. And that's kind of typical for medics. We don't last too long before we reach burnout. So I burned out on the bus, on the ambulance, and I remember coming home to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, poor girl. And I remember saying, you know what, I don't think I'm going to stay in medicine. And she was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I said, I think I'm going to open a coffee shop. And her jaw just dropped. She was like, a coffee shop? And I was like, yeah. It's just, how are you going to do this? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to do it. So having no entrepreneur experience, having no barista experience, I thought, well, gosh, maybe I could just start off with a coffee trailer and just do French press. And that's where kind of the seed began. So I started building this coffee trailer. Well, gosh, the first thing I ran into was the code and regulations, and they took me for a turn. They really did. So I really quickly had to change my perspective on what my menu was going to be, because French press, to do, commercial French press, would require a lot of open flame. That much open flame was going to require a lot of suppression units, which jacked up the cost. And I was out of pocket at this point. I was self-financed, and I said, man, I don't think that's going to work. So instead I turned to the espresso machine. And that's where I got my introduction on the espresso machine. I got some training. I got my training from the guy that actually sold the espresso machines. And so I built out this coffee trailer. It took me about 3 months to build it out. Old vintage camper, the scamp campers, those little fiberglass coffee bean looking things. Yeah, that was my first build out. It was a 1974 scamper. And I built that thing out, or scamp camper, excuse me. And I built it out and just started setting up, and we hit the floor running. We really did. I was able to quit my day job within my first 3 months, and I had to get an employee right away. And by the end of our first year, I had to buy a second truck because I was just booked. So it was good. It was good. But that was my introduction. I said, okay, well, I'm going to start off with the trailer, stepping stones. In medicine, as a medic, we have a saying, start out with the basics. Before you start intubating someone, maybe we should put some oxygen on them, right? Like let's just start off with the basics, and we'll kind of step up from there. We took that same model and applied it to coffee. Said, okay, well, let's start off with the trailer, get some business experience behind us, get some barista experience behind us. We'll go from there. So that was the path that we took.
Well, where did it go from there?
So the first year we got that second truck, and by the second year I had 4 carts built out. So we had 2 trucks and 4 carts and a full-time employee at that point. And then I had like a little coffee group on Facebook where I could take people that were looking for extra side hustles, and that's how we did our catering. And then so the 2 trucks, or the truck trailer and 4 carts. By my 3rd year, we opened up my brick and mortar. And so then I had the brick and mortar, started learning how to roast my own beans. And that was kind of at the peak. That was back in 2018 is when I had the brick and mortar. And I held that open for just shy of 2 years. We got pregnant with my second daughter. And I said, like there's a mouse in my pocket, right? My wife is pregnant with my second daughter. And we decided, we said, okay. By then, I had already put out an ebook. Because when I first got started, Chris, there wasn't anything. There was no resources on how to build coffee trailers. And so I was new to this world. So I'm like having to go through, like RV forums to find out about the plumbing, go through barista forums to find out about equipment, restaurant equipment, to find out about how to do things like floors and ceilings and all that stuff. There was just a lot of scouring the internet. So I sat down, and what I did is I bought the number one seller from Amazon. This is what I did. I'm not proud of it, but this is what I did. So I bought the number one book on how to build coffee shops from Amazon, and I used that as a template to write my book. So if it talked about pre-marketing activities, I talked about pre-marketing activities. If it talked about inventory, I talked about my inventory. So I wrote a book. I wrote my first book on how to open up coffee trucks. It was called The Ultimate Guide on How to Open Up Coffee Trucks. And I put that out. That book picked up. It took a couple years and took a little bit of work. I had to put some elbow grease into it, but that book picked up. So by the time my second year of my brick and mortar came along, that book was competing in sales against my brick and mortar. And I didn't have to work 60 hours a week to have that book compete in sales. So it was a no-brainer. When we got pregnant with my second daughter, we said, okay, let's go ahead and close up shop on the brick and mortar. We did. So we closed up shop on the brick and mortar, and we pivoted towards coffee consulting. Closed the coffee shop in 19, early 19, late 18. And then I started to focus full time on building out more material for coffee trucking. The first thing I did was started to interview the leading espresso machine manufacturers and grill them, their technicians. I called up all their technicians, La Mazzorco, Salmonelli, and I called up their technicians and just grilled them. Hey, why is your machine better for the mobile application? Not why is it a better machine, but why is it better for mobile? Because mobile's a different beast. You're bumping around in a trailer. You're dealing with hot and cold fluctuations. So if you got espresso machines that have all these fancies of bells and whistles, they're subject to break. And so we wanted to find out what's the hardy equipment that's going to put out a quality cup of coffee consistently that I'm not having to take to the technicians. So we started that research, just digging into all the equipment. Then from there, I hired a loan officer to walk me through how to create a business plan. So then we did a business plan template, just started putting out content on how to get into this industry. And gosh, I couldn't have done it at a better time, because when the pandemic hit, people turned to mobile. A lot of these coffee shops couldn't stay open anymore. Everyone went outside, and there was the entire industry was looking for an expert on how to do outside coffee. And I was there at the right place at the right time. Yeah, so that's kind of how I found myself to where I am today.
Excellent. So you pivoted into training and consulting specifically for trucks. Love the serendipity. Hard time, but it's a good thing that a resource like yours is available. In the course of all of your own experiences in running a truck and a brick and mortar, for that time, the difference between a truck and a brick and mortar, I mean, obviously there's the overhead is just like a money thing, really. And beyond that, I guess, highlight for us the differences between a truck and a traditional coffee shop, and why somebody might want to choose a truck versus a regular retail shop.
Yeah, really good question. So, I mean, first and foremost, to me, what stands out is the time. With the truck, you can do things like setting up a route where you can run 6 a.m. to 12 p.m., 6 hours a day, and then you're done. So you have a little bit more control of your time. You're not quite held to the expectations that a brick and mortar is held to. If you post on Google that your brick and mortar is open to 7, then by gosh, you better be open to 7. And the truck just doesn't have that issue, which is nice. The other thing about trucks is they have a beautiful advantage towards catering. Coffee is a volume business. We all know that. That's why Starbucks and drive-thrus and that type of stuff, they tend to do well. So catering is a really awesome opportunity for trucks, because you make a whole bunch of money in a little bit of time, which is nice. You get a good catering gig. That means you can cruise for a little while. So if it's all right, can I throw numbers? I know my audience loves numbers. Like, what do you mean catering? So like a good example of catering, I just posted this on my IG account, was like, we did a catering event where we did hot chocolates to a church. A church called us up. They said, we want to do hot chocolates. And so we did 7,000 hot chocolates over the course of 3 days at $1.08 a piece. And the overhead was like 8 cents. So I made $1 off of each one. And it was just like giving them hot chocolate Cambros. And then that's it. They did the serving. So, you make $7,000 in 3 days, you're sitting pretty that month. Then at that point, it's up to you on whether or not you want to go camping or wherever you want to do. So it has some flexibility that the brick and mortar doesn't have. Number two is startup cost is the big one. So it just all depends on code and regulations. The code and regulations are different per state. They're different per county, can actually be different within different cities within a county. But for the most part, it's ran by counties. There are some exceptions to that. Florida tends to like to run it statewide. And then, of course, like New York, your boroughs run differently. Anyhow, so each county is slightly different, but for the most part, most people can start their coffee truck or trailer. We'll just say trailer because if you have the trailers are lower startup cost. They can get started 10 to 15K. And for my brick and mortar, I put 30K easily into that thing when I went to start it. So getting started is easier, which, maybe someone with, no experience such as myself and lower capital, it allows them to be able to start up. There's another thing that we see in this industry, and I'm going to tangent for a second here, reel me back in if I go too far. But there's another thing that I see in the industry where people will get loans. And if you want to learn how to go out of business quickly, right? I see folks that will, no experience, barista or business, will get a $50,000 loan and buy a truck brand new. And so then their business starts off, usually in the beginning. I was fortunate. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I launched early. But not everyone's like that. Most people, when they start off, it takes them a while to get their name out, start building business. And when you have a loan, then, that bill starts immediately. You have that bill right away, and you don't have income coming in. And a lot of people quit their day job to do this. So here they are, no secondary source of income, a big $700,000. And the problem with those loans is you also have to have the insurance to match it. So, your bills are high right out the gate, income's low right out the gate. And within 6 months, they're out of business. They got to go get another job because they're paying off on these loans. So the way I like to teach is I say, well, let's come in low. Start off with the basics before we go all out. With the truck or a trailer, you can self-finance and then reinvest as the business grows. And that allows people to, you're not getting rid of the risk, but you're kind of lowering the risk. So they're a little bit less risky. It allows them to kind of test this idea on whether or not they want to do this. And sometimes they don't want to do it. Sometimes they get into the business and they go, you know what, it's not for me. I don't like the idea of feast and famine. I want a steady paycheck. And so coming in with lower startup capital, 10 to 15K, you can turn around and sell that trailer, because used trailers sell for 25, 30K. You could turn around and sell that trailer and then get out of that business without being in the hole.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is one of the things that made people want to turn to it in the pandemic. And not only that, but you also mentioned that, you can start with this low cost, but also you mentioned hot chocolates and the fact that it's a limited menu. I have a client myself that is doing a trailer, eventually a truck. And that, it is not going to be the full bore menu right off the bat, which is unique, I think, because if you opened a brick and mortar and you said, we're going to try to open with a minimal menu and then we're going to expand the menu as we go, there's a limit to that. I mean, you can do that, but people expect a brick and mortar to be pretty much set from the beginning and not a lot of flex. With this truck, and you tell me, I mean, it sounds like that's what it is. Like, you have the ability to start small and change things and manipulate it, make it malleable as you go, which sounds really cool, because that's a really robust learning environment.
Oh, you're 100% correct. Man, you're hitting it right on the head, because one of the things that I look at is, especially with new entrepreneurs, a lot of times they'll want to build out this full menu right out the get-go. And for me, I go, well, is that what your audience wants? This was a big learning curve for me. And that's one of the beautiful things about coming in with the limited experience that I had is I didn't have a preconceived notion of how I should do this. And that allowed me to be able to experiment with my menu, with my crowd, with my audience, and then pivot based upon the results of those experiments. And I'll give you an example of this. When we first started off Helix, that was my brick and mortar. It was a coffee shop and a yoga studio. And I really wanted to do some self-liquidating opportunities for Helix, SLO. Now, for folks that may or may not know what an SLO is, basically it's a marketing technique. And what it is basically your budget is paid for by your conversion. And I'll give you a small example of this. Is like I use this with my Google ads. Okay. And so say, for example, I have an ebook. Well, the ebook pays for the Google ads. So if I, sell an ebook for $10, then I can advertise my Google ads for $10. And that purchase pays for the marketing budget. But during that time, there's signups, there may be an upsell that people sign up to my newsletter. People maybe upsell after the ebook to a consultation or a master class or something. So you make money on the back end. And so I wanted to work on an SLO, a self-liquidating opportunity for my coffee shop. And for me, that was this farmer market. We used to do all the farmers markets in the city. So we had we'd send out 8 carts at once. I mean, it's crazy. But anyhow, so we'd be sending out these carts. And basically, as long as the cups that I sold that day paid for the barista's wage and my cost of goods, then it allowed me to get my name out to clients. And the rule that I had is every cup that was sold, you needed to hand them a coupon to my brick and mortar. So it fed my brick and mortar is basically what it did. Well, anyhow, so when we first started doing this, I would haul down my 110 espresso machine, set it up with the pumps, hook it up to electricity. And what we were finding, though, is out of 100 cups sold, we would sell maybe 1 or 2 cappuccinos and lattes. The rest of them were iced lattes. And so then we said, well, do we have to haul this espresso machine down and do, because this was very labor intensive, And we're like, well, wait a second, do we even need this thing? And so let's try to make the espresso ahead of time. And let's send all the drinks down in a cooler. So we did that. No change in sales. None whatsoever. Then we got smart on it and we said, well, can we cold brew the ice drinks, the ice lattes, instead of using espresso shots? Can we just make a really thick cold brew concentrate? So we got started on that experiment. And then we ran the beta test. We did a blind taste testing of cold brew versus espresso lattes, and the cold brew beat out the espresso lattes.
Now you're talking about iced?
Yeah, iced. Yeah, thank you. It's at the farmers market, summertime. Everybody wants an iced drink. Yeah. It's funny because the only ones that wanted hot drinks were the vendors because they were the ones that had to get there early. But usually by the time the crowd got there, it's 10 o'clock. People wanted an iced drink. So we were like, we don't even need to bring the espresso machine down there. So it was a game changer for us because it was an eye-opening experience on whether or not you needed an espresso machine to make income. Because when I first started this, everybody on the forums were like, you have to have an espresso machine. And when we tested that theory, it didn't hold water. We were able to make $1,000 days off of cold brew lattes and bags of coffee. And we did merchandise, cups and t-shirts and stuff. But, we were able to make plenty of profit without it. So the beautiful thing about coming in low and low startup is you get to test your market and see what they want. And they'll let you know through their sales. They'll say, oh, okay, we like this drink versus we like that drink. And that allows to pivot based upon the data. And I'm a big, big advocate of that. So, you get down there, you open up shop, you see that this particular drink starts to sell. If cold brew starts to sell more than espresso or something, well, maybe we need to invest into a better cold brew apparatus, more cold brew equipment, start expanding on maybe nitro, and seeing if that sells a little bit more. That's the beauty. There's there's definitely a lower expectation for a tabletop setup versus a cart. And then, the coffee trailer, the expectations slightly go up versus a cart. And then the brick and mortar, the expectations go up. And then once you go to roaster, then you really have a lot of high expectations.
Yeah, and the expectations are built off of what people experience in those places as an industry, that people go to coffee shops and shops that generally have more stuff and so forth. So each tier has its own preconceived notion of what I'm going to experience here. And maybe intuitively, there's this idea that you need to make up for the casualness of that environment and the simplicity of the environment by overcomplicating it. I could see it where somebody would say, well, we need to have a bunch of signature beverages sort of to make up for the simplicity of this so that we stand out. We need to be unique in this. Talk a little bit about when you're operating a truck, especially a truck, I think, because to me that feels like one of the most, and this could be just me not knowing, but when you're in a truck, you slide the glass. You slide it close, open, you see like the top half of the person, but it's so far removed from you versus a trailer or even especially a tabletop. The experience that the customer has, how do we balance simplicity of the menu with giving people an experience of hospitality that's not just this commodity of coffee that you would get? So it's not like a vending machine on wheels.
Now, that's a good point. I guess there's coffee trailers and trucks will kind of come in two different flavors. And each truck is going to pivot based upon the crowd. So if I'm just setting up at my normal Monday through Friday thing, then time is not, say, for example, I'm doing my route. I might start my route in the morning, start off with daycares. They open real early and you have, mom, dads that come through there and the teachers themselves and stuff. And so that environment, it's chill. You can talk to people, see how their day's getting started, see what's coming up this weekend. You don't have a line of 10 hanging out behind the person that's ordering. And so it's a little easier to connect with people, especially on routes, because the gorgeous thing about routes, what's really cool is you kind of go to the same place every day or every other day. You just start learning names, learn drinks, you build regulars, just like at a brick and mortar. So you do get that opportunity, which is really nice. I really enjoy that part of it. But then, that same trailer come the weekend, I might take that down to, my local 5K or marathon where they have an attendance of 10,000. And suddenly I'm turned into like festival mode, where I'm going to limit my menu and I'm really having to pump drinks out, so to speak. You're moving product, moving. That environment's going to be a little bit different. That environment is more based upon cup per hour. Those big events tend to have an overhead. If you go to like a festival or a sporting event or something, they'll usually want either a couple hundred coming in or a percentage. So those environments come down to cup per hour, very similar to a drive-through model, where you're on the clock. So it kind of just depends on what environment I'm facing. If I'm doing routes or setting up a Monday through Friday, I'll get an opportunity to talk to people and really engage, and that's really fun. And then if it's, festivals or something where I'm just kind of moving product, then at that point it's limited menu, trying to get people their drinks so they're not standing in line for more than 10 minutes.
So you can be complex and you can be simple, but it needs to be contextually appropriate. And it needs to also be something that you can do at high volume as well. I mean, like if you made your name based on complex drinks, but you needed to serve thousands of people, you'd be digging your own grave at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like any other equation, right? It's like, well, pick quality or quantity. When I'm out to move product, like say, for example, we're doing, like that hot chocolate event. Like that's water-based hot chocolate. That's not milk-based hot chocolate. There's no way I can steam that amount of milk. I have to switch over. So I'm losing quality to serve more quantity, so it's just kind of changing that equation. For some people, unique drinks make sense. This is my perspective that rule number one in business is you have to solve a problem. And different environments have different problems. If I'm at a festival 5K, then that problem is it's hot and I'm tired. And so I'm going to be solving that problem with big cold drinks that, might have sugar or caffeine. But then at other events where it's a little bit more intimate, like farmers markets or at coffee festivals, I really like to do this. I'll set up more of an experience-based type of environment because I love that. I love going to places where they have experiences, and I'm a big fan of that. And sometimes I'm the experience as the entrepreneur, and sometimes it's the product that's the experience. But I'm a big fan of doing experience-based business. I was just at a farmer's market this weekend. They had this lady, man, she had this line wrapped around her tent. She wasn't even in a truck. She was in a tent. But they're doing like, the aqua frescas, the fruit drinks.
Yeah.
They got like, sliced water. I mean, it's like a Bloody Mary. They got like sliced watermelon, pineapple coming out, and like chili papaya, and just it was amazing. And they sell it in this huge mug, this like 64-ounce mug. So people are walking away with these huge mugs of, sugar liquid and fruit and stuff. And I was like, oh, that looks so cool. And sure enough, she had that line wrapped around the corner. So for her, she's not going to move as much product as someone selling aqua fresca out of a 5-gallon bucket. But what she lacks in quantity, she's going to make up in quality. She gets to charge a little bit more. She gets to share that experience. And maybe people will book her for something later on too, weddings and that type of thing.
That becomes a calling card of her business, and people will pay for that experience.
Yes. And so for me, what I love to do is I love blind taste test. I love them on my end because it allows me to experiment and make the public my guinea pig. But people love trying things out, man. They do. So it gets people into my booth. We go, okay, try this one and compare it against this one. And, it allows me to see which product people like a little bit more, but it also allows people to try something for free. And there's something fun about that mystery. So
I can imagine somebody thinking about the example of what you just mentioned, like these fruity drinks and how unique they are, and think, yeah, that's what we need. Because if we don't have that, then people won't come to us. And it's still true, I think, that people generally, even if you just had cappuccinos and lattes and coffee, if you're in a position like a truck, especially in a truck, in a catering event or something like that, it's almost more of a relief for people to have the basics in that situation than it is at a coffee shop, which is this, you're entering into it voluntarily, you have the freedom to move about freely, right? But if you're at a festival, if you're at an event, and you find that there's limited resources, the oasis of coffee, even basic coffee, from a cart or a truck or trailer is magical. So maybe people can overthink the unique signature beverages and undervalue the basics done well.
yeah, I 110% agree. When I got started in the business, everyone was like, well, what are you going to do different than everyone else? And to share those experiences are great. And to have, the aqua fresca and all that's great. But I do not believe that's what you need to have a successful business. I think by and large, what's most important is that you deliver a quality, convenient, consistent cup of coffee. To me, those are the three big pillars. And so, quality cup of coffee, having good, strong quality assurance checklists that happens during your rush. Not people always want to check the quality after the rush. No, it's got to be in the middle of your rush. What are you doing to make sure your
Yes.
milk is stable? What are you doing to make sure that you're pulling the same shot every time? Like those things need to be in place. Consistent means showing up when you say you're going to show up. Answering the phone, my goodness, I can't tell you how much business I got just from answering my phone. I mean, that sounds so silly, but like when I go to call to book someone, every time I'm getting a voicemail or it's so difficult. I just answer my phone. To this day, I still answer my phone. So just, solid business practices, showing up with a smile, coming early, like, hey, I'm here early. Is that cool? Checking in with people the day before to make sure everything's still good. Like I think that's the stuff that needs to be in place. That's what you need. And when you do that, then people learn to trust you and they book you more, they'll book you again. You get that reoccurring business that's so vital. So from my experience was I just showed up on time with a smile and made sure that my product was good. And I found that worked for me. that was good enough to expand my business and grow it.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny because there is a lot of experiences that I've had of vendors of various kinds where you can tell the people that have done their due diligence and people who have not. Where it's fun to learn as you go, but it's not fun to experiment on people, especially for the people you're experimenting on, within limits, right? But I've seen people, they're just having a hard time, and maybe a bit of that preparation, like you're talking about quality control or good business practices and showing up with a smile or even just being confident, that comes from preparation beforehand so that your minds can rest on the moment instead of worrying about the things that you skipped on. Either you didn't build it right or you didn't plan right or the inventory's off, something like that. So if you want to show up with a smile, it feels like you need to do these things, these basics well. That kind of leads me to my next question here, which is about the practical steps for somebody. Two different categories here. I think one is the actual construction of the vehicle itself, because once you start to get this thing built, and it is built, now it's built, right? It might be really difficult for you to adjust things afterwards. So there's that aspect that I'm interested in some best practices for, because you might have to work with the trades and you're not used to it or have any experience in it. And then just being prepared for the events themselves. Like you mentioned, checking on, make sure everything's good, that kind of stuff. So in those two categories of preparing the actual environment, the structure, and then preparing for the service that the structure is going to be used for, what are some things that you think are so just critical that people have to do to be successful?
So when it comes to actually building the unit itself, I think the key to that is, I really believe there's two. I think the first and foremost is understanding the codes and regulations in which you have to build this thing out to, because that's what's going to get you rejected at health departments. I take that one step further when I'm working with clients. I always encourage, don't just read your own code and regulations, but look at the big cities next to you. I'm here in Albuquerque, so for me, that's like Phoenix, El Paso, Denver, maybe even LA. Take a look at those because one, you may want to travel to those and do some type of event there, a coffee fest or a festival or something. But two, for whatever reason, when you go to decide to leave this business, maybe you want a brick and mortar, maybe, like me, your wife gets pregnant, something, or whatever, life happens. And for whatever reason, if you need to sell it, when you're in the build out phase, if you build out to those code and regulations, then you now can sell to those big cities where the bigger money is. So for me, most of the time it's the labor is what really is costly on these things. Whether or not you have a 10 by 14 sink or 9 by 5 sink, the plumber doesn't care. He's going to charge you $100 an hour either way. So the price difference between those two sinks is maybe a couple $100. Might as well sink in that couple $100 and build to the larger code and regulation so that you can really mitigate your risk if you need to pivot. So that's kind of the first and foremost. The way I teach is I walk people through the process of code and regulations and then show them how to hire electricians and plumbers and contractors to do the work. And what that does is it cuts out the general contractor so that you can keep the overhead down. Because I'm a big advocate of trying to keep that startup cost down. For people to do that, they have to seek out someone that's already done that process and gain the consulting to do that. And man, if there's one thing that I can change about the way that I did this, I wish when I first started off, I would have went to a consultant right away. These days, I've learned my lessons. Like if I'm going into a new industry, first thing I do is book a consultant. But back then I didn't. And so you have to learn through trial and error, which is expensive and costly. So when it comes to building out the actual unit itself and the apparatus itself, if you can find someone, it doesn't have to be me, but if you can find someone that has done it before, it'll really help. And the second question was towards how to prepare for events. So there's a couple different ways that I prepare for events. The first is to just get a general idea on how many people I'm going to have. And I have a formula that I use. So if I understand the amount of population that's going to be in front of me, then I can extract a total ticket sales from that. And then I kind of look at the quality of the event. Is it a festival? where I'm going to be moving product quickly? Is it a farmer's market where people are more interested in craft goods and kind of a local scene? And I base my upsells based upon that. So if it's like a farmer's market, I'm going to bring more bags of coffee. If it's a festival, I'm going to bring more t-shirts, because that's people are usually looking on picking up t-shirts. It's always based upon the crowd. If it's a new event for me, like a wedding, for example, weddings are so scary. I'll tell you a little story on a wedding. The first wedding I did, I told you this story offline, but the first wedding I did was out of my brick and mortar. And I'm getting ready for this wedding, and I'm stocking my coffee truck. And I have a barista doing my brick and mortar. And lo and behold, in walks Kevin Bacon into my coffee shop. And he's this tiny little guy. He's 5'6", $135. And he's wearing sunglasses at 8 in the morning. That was my first clue. And he's got that like classic long Kevin Bacon hair. Man, I was so starstruck. I didn't know what to say. I made a jerk of myself. I said, this is what I told him. You're going to laugh at me. This is what I told him. I said, "Are you Kevin Bacon?" And he goes, "Yes, I am." And I go, "I won't tell anyone." And he goes, "Okay, thank you."
Secret is safe.
Oh man, I felt like such a jerk. I was like, okay, well, I'm glad I got that over with. Now I don't have to be starstruck to anyone anymore. So yeah, he ordered a black coffee with 2 sugars. That was the first time I got ready for my first wedding. But with weddings, it's a lot of setting up and breaking down. And I'm a big fan of practicing and reputation, because this is the paramedic and the military in me. They just kind of beat that over and over and over again. You would line up all your equipment, set out for inspection, and get ready. I just kind of take the same mental model to the same thing. Okay, let's line up all of our equipment. You know, what kind of battle, so to speak, am I going in today? Okay, well, I'm going into a festival. Let's just do a head count on these t-shirts, make sure everything's good. So for me, that's a big thing, is preparation. It really helps me. If I go through and just set everything up and knock it down, set everything up and knock it down, that really helps me kind of prepare for everything. That's the way I do it.
You know, when you're preparing, you have all of your wisdom and knowledge and all this stuff that you've kind of experienced over your lifetime. A lot of the stuff that you can't really expect other people to do or have. How do you go about with your baristas and some people that are new to your experience? And we just got done talking about how people want an experience. And when you're a cart or a truck, sometimes you're not going to have the same person for years on end, because it's a seasonal thing for some people. And at best, sometimes it's just waiting to see if we have business this next week or this next month. So what goes into the preparation of making sure that not only are you getting the right people, but you're making up for the lack of their being steeped in this culture? Because the culture is not, it's mobile. It's not rooted so heavily that people would just immediately pick up on it as well as they might with a coffee bar, where they get exposed to it so much that they catch it faster. How do you hire and train people to provide that kind of experience in a mobile and coffee truck setting?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I made the mistake of hiring with experience first. And the coffee truck and trailer is a different beast, man. It is not the same. So if someone is used to a brick and mortar and you stick them in the truck, they get worked. And it's brutal. I mean, it's hot. It's hot. Okay. If you're in the summer, it's hot. And, you know, you don't have all the things that you do in the brick and mortar. You don't have all the tools. You don't have all the milks. You don't have all the fancies. You know, you're limited. And so if you start off in a brick and mortar and then you move to this environment that's a little bit more, you know, grueling, it's a shift in perspective. And I've run into my fair share of headaches where it's kind of tough. And you know, we kind of get this. I remember that as a medic, we used to do this a lot. Like if you got someone with experience, sometimes you got bad habits in that experience. Sometimes people weren't, you know, doing what they were supposed to with that so-called experience. And to me, I've always felt like it's harder to break a bad habit than just to start a new good one. So moving forward, I made the decision to hire folks with no experience. That was the way that I set things up. My method in which I did this, I had a kind of a unique way of doing it. I always ran Craigslist and Facebook ads that I was hiring part-time and side gigs. So that was constant. So I always did that. And I usually screened on those. I would put up some kind of basic screener, like you must do this somewhere in that. You ever hear the Van Halen green M&M story?
It sounds familiar, a little familiar.
Okay,
But
I forget where I read this story at, but it was basically Van Halen wouldn't do a concert unless there was a bowl of just green M&Ms in their dressing room. And people thought that they were just being like pompous, like, oh, how dare you? But when they went back and explained this, they said, look, we were one of the first groups to come out and do some serious pyrotechnic shows. So we had to have a big safety manual on this thing. And we needed to know that the crews from city to city would follow this safety manual. And so what they did is in the middle of one of those big paragraphs, they put that clause and put a bowl of M&Ms in the dressing room with nothing but green M&Ms in it. And that let them know that their contractors were reading the manual. So if they went in to go do a show and there was no bowl of green M&Ms, then they knew, okay, these guys aren't reading the manual. It was a safety thing for them. It was, I always thought that was so clever. Anyways, so, I would put something like that in my wanted ads, something to just screen right at the gate. Because when you post these things, man, you get like 30 hits right away. It's like, I can't sort through all these. So I'd post that, screen right away, screen at the email. And then I would bring them in and I would say, okay, well, we do an interview. They showed up on time. Great. That was always one for me. Whereas if you can't make it on time, for me, I always felt if you can't make it on time, then there are other things that are happening that's going to affect the business more than just your punctuality. I've always felt that if folks that have a hard time making it on time, there's other things in their life that's going on that's crazy. And it sucks because sometimes it's just a mistake and someone is just 10 minutes late on that one day. But I found that tends to be a good screener, which I'll just put a little side note for contractors. I use that same screener. If you can't make it on time, there's other issues that you're going to have throughout the job. So that was one of the big screeners for me. And then we would sat down. I usually like to get to know them a little bit, find out what they're doing with their lives, what they plan on doing with their lives. And what I looked for is people that had a higher purpose. I found it's kind of odd and I'm stereotyping here, but I found like nursing students were some of the hardest workers I've ever found because they get it. They go to a higher mission. They're willing to work hard for something greater than themselves. And I just found that that's the personality that I work really well with. Those were all things that I would get an understanding on. And then for me, I would say, okay, this looks really good. I'd really like to have you at an event. And so I'd have them join my Facebook group and then also send out text messages. And so whenever I had a catering event coming up and during my height, I would have multiple catering events during each day. We would run 15, 20 catering events a week. So for me, I constantly needed help. And so I was constantly bringing people into these catering groups. And the people that just signed up and showed up, those were the people that I started working with. And in the beginning, it was just the window. Like when we start working together, I'm on the machine, you're on the window. This is how you take orders. These are the questions you need to ask. Here's the basic menu. And I'm right next to them. So if someone's like, can you make a blah, blah, can you make an iced cappuccino? Then, yeah, okay, I'll answer that question. But for the most part, here's how you write on the cup. Here's how you take money. And if they started showing promise, then during the slow times, I would say, hey, let me show you how to draw a shot real quick. Let me show you how to adjust the grinder real quick. Look, check this out. This is how you steam milk. And that's where I would pick my part-time and my full-timers from, or from that group itself. So it kind of reminds me of dating. It's like the way the system's currently set up is you put an ad out when you're hiring, is you put an ad out and you hire just based upon that one interview. And I'm like, that's kind of like getting in a relationship off the first date. I'm like, you're kind of jumping to conclusions here. So I usually like to work with someone a little bit first and get a feel for their work ethic, whether or not they're taking initiative, do they show up on time, are they just fun to work with? Some people are just a blast to work with. And so those are all the things that I kind of look for during these non-committal events that we're doing. It's kind of like dating for a little while. And then if things are looking good, then we move on to the next step. Okay, well, I got a part-time position that just opened. Do you want it? Still, when I hire contractors, whenever I'm hiring someone for the website, anything I do, I still use that same model.
That's really smart. The idea that you can get to know somebody simply by having the right questions. Yeah, you can't necessarily. I mean, you can screen very well. I think there's a lot to that. But I do like the steps that you're going through, and it's consequential to the experience the guest has. And honestly, it's not even talking about the guest of your truck, but also you. I mean, you're not going to give as great service or be enthused about your business if you're constantly working with people that need extraordinary amounts of babysitting and are an emotional drain on you. So you got to get the right people that align with your values and accept the work for what it is. It's not a cushy job, especially when you're mobile. It can be actually quite grueling. And so I've done my fair share of mobile events and farmers markets over the years. And, you know, I would take an opening shift at a coffee bar any day, honestly.
Yeah.
If it were just the air conditioning and that dial-in shot just sounds pretty good right now, rather than hauling all this water and whatever else. So yeah, getting the right people is so critical.
But there's a beauty to that. And for me, when you do these events with people, there's a little bit of that, like that shared trauma, you know, the good stuff right there. You know what I mean? You're like, when you rock the truck with someone, or you do a big festival, or like Coachella that we did, or, you know, when we've done like our big concerts or something, I mean, it's stressful. And you move through that together and you work through those problems together, you grow a relationship. And, you know, I still to this day, I'm still in contact with my baristas, you know, like any good things, you know, there's pros and cons. But one of the beauties to that is definitely that you get to grow those relationships.
One of the benefits of having a mobile coffee truck, coffee trailer, for sure. So I am grateful for this conversation with you and all that you're doing to help people creating these experiences for their customers all over the nation. I would love to learn about how we can stay in touch with you and what you do at Green Joe.
I have the website, greenjoecoffeetruck.com. We're doing some rebranding to Green Joe Coffee School. Been doing online classes now. This is our 4th year. But this fall, we're opening a school, a trailer, where people can come in and work on the cart and work on the trailer and learn how to do it in person. So
Beautiful.
I'm so excited about that one. That's because there's a bunch of coffee schools out there, but there's no one doing it mobile. And I really want to help with that. So I think that's going to be really awesome. I'm really excited about that one.
That's excellent. And I hope that you bring that on the road, like a road show of trailer school.
Oh, man. I tell you what, Louisville is my heart right there. That's where I want to go. I want to take that straight out to Louisville. That's right.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vincent. I really appreciate your insights here and for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Well, I'm excited, man. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited about this interview. I love watching the podcast and the IG lives and kind of seeing your story along the way too. So it's just great to be part of the journey. So I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that, and I really want to, re-emphasize what Vincent has told us today about basically keeping things excellent and simple. There is so much to be said for, how we can potentially overcomplicate things, and the idea that we can be excellent in a few good things and make the experience the differentiator is huge. And the idea of a coffee truck is something that you want to be flexible. And it doesn't really make sense to overcomplicate it because you're adding more hurdles for yourself than might be necessary. So start with the basics. Start with a great foundation. Do things with excellence. And because of the flexibility of this expression of coffee, you can definitely add as you go and change things. And it's a lot easier to do that than as a brick and mortar, for sure. So I hope that what Vincent has shared today has been extremely helpful, and a huge thank you to Vincent for joining us on the show. If you want more information about Green Joe Coffee School, go ahead and look them up over at greenjoecoffeetruck.com. And that's where you can find all the information you need, as well as Green Joe Coffee School greenjoecoffeetruck.com. So greenjoecoffeetruck.com, as well as Green Joe Coffee School. I know that Vincent is just getting finished building out the trailer that is going to be the school where you actually get to work in a coffee trailer and get the experience of working in the context that you're going to find yourself in so often. So that's really awesome. And Vincent's doing great work. So check it out, greenjoecoffeeschool.com. And if you have any comments, questions, or feedback from me about today's episode or anything else related to Keys to the Shop, you can always find me, Chris, at keystotheshop.com. If you have questions about the key holder coaching groups that are being launched in September, that is also where you can reach out to me. I am happy to answer any questions you have, or you can check out more information at keystotheshop.com/consulting. And I look forward to hearing from you. Now, one of the places that I love to send people to get resourced is Coffee Fest. Coffee Fest has been a trade show and hub for education in retail coffee for 30 years. So many people that have been attending Coffee Fest or even just attended Coffee Fest once have walked away with great insights and tools to help them be a success in retail coffee. There are 2 shows coming up. That is Anaheim, California, very shortly, the beginning of August. And then in November, there is Orlando, Florida. And you can get 50% off your general registration, your general admission, by using the code KEYS, KEYS. I would encourage you to go to coffeefest.com to learn more information and check out all of the wonderful lectures, trainings, workshops, and panel discussions that are going to be had the trade show floor with awesome vendors. You don't want to miss out on this and the community. There is a huge benefit to gathering together, learning, and networking. So I will be speaking at this event as I do at every event. So I hope to see you in my lecture on employee retention and care, as well as the workshop on creating systems for your coffee shop. Again, check out all of this information over at coffeefest.com, and I hope to see you there. And with that, that is the end of our episode today, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Always a pleasure to have you here as a listener supporting the show. I am so thankful for all of you. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. Follow us on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. And don't forget to share these episodes on your social media accounts with your followers, with your team. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.